Okay, so call to order at 6:06 p.m. I'm just going to pull up the territorial recognition. Brock University acknowledges the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to work and live here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. All right. So can we motion to approve the agenda for meeting number 2? Can we have a mover? Charlie, a seconder? Thomas, all in favor, please raise your hand. Perfect. You can lower your hands. Any opposed? Or any abstentions? Perfect. And then motion to approve the minutes from the July 22nd special meeting. So can I have a mover for that? Mohiz, a seconder. Charlie, all in favor? Any opposed? And any abstentions? Thomas is abstaining. Okay, that passes. All right, so we have a sort of a time guideline for today's meeting because we are going over a lot of different policies. So we'll try as best as possible to stick to this timeline. That way, we don't go too much over time and everyone can enjoy the rest of their lovely Monday evening. So we'll start with the club's policy approval. So Kaylee, when you're ready, feel free to go ahead and share what you have, and we'll aim for about 30 minutes for this.
Okay, Brielle, thank you. Apologize, everyone. I'm not feeling well, so bear with me. But I do have the 3 clubs policies that I'm looking for the board to approve tonight. I'm just going to share the first document. So typically what would happen when we're getting a policy approved that's being edited is you would get a document that has the track changes on it. When we started to go through policy 500 and start the track changes document, it was just a complete mess. We were moving things around. We were deleting a lot of sections. We were rewriting a lot of sections, and it just didn't read very well, which is why I included the current document on the portal. So if you wanted to read through that, you could take a look at that. I'm just going to highlight some of the major changes, and then if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer. So we have here clubs policy 500, and this document pretty much covers everything to do with clubs and ratified clubs at BUSU. There's a few changes that we made. There is reference in this new policy to a new position called the club's administrator. So you'll see that referenced a few times throughout this policy, and policy 501, which is clubs funding. We're currently hiring for that position. It actually closes this Friday, and then we'll have somebody new in that role, and that role is primarily to assist Chloe, and they're going to oversee most of kind of the administration of the club's funding. Another change that we made to this policy, a couple years ago, we worked out an agreement with the Graduate Student Association where we would ratify graduate student clubs. They just didn't really have like a club system set up on their end, but there was some interest for some graduate students to ratify clubs. And so in exchange for, a small amount of money that the GSA was providing to BUSU, BUSU would ratify graduate student clubs and provide them with training and, the access to risk management and room bookings and printing and all of that. And the only exception to that is they wouldn't get any of the BUSU club funding. And so as when we started to ratify graduate student clubs, we edited the policy to kind of mention graduate student clubs kind of sprinkled throughout. Just it didn't read very well, so we cleaned that up in this policy. And we just said that, it basically everything applies to graduate student clubs. And then the last kind of significant change that was made was in reference to any issues that that clubs have. We cleaned up the section about disciplinary actions and how they're handled. So previously or currently, we have a different process for dealing with removing a member versus deratification. And we just made those processes the same and kind of clarified how it works a little bit more. Essentially, we have Class A offenses, which are serious in nature and would result or could result in a student being removed from a club or a club actually being deratified. And that could be something like not risk managing an event, or not following the BUSU club's policy or some of the BROC policies that clubs are required to follow. And then there's Class B offenses, which aren't as serious, just kind of small issues that Chloe may handle day to day, which would primarily result in something just like a conversation with the club's manager, potentially a written warning, or something like that. So we broke down kind of the procedure for removing a club member and for deratification a little bit clearer than it was before. And that gives the club's team, so Chloe, the VPSS, and myself, a little bit better direction on how to handle those situations. There was an update as well for the election section. As you're kind of aware, we did test an election software through our website. We actually used that software this past February for the club elections, and it worked pretty well. So there was just some updating there that explained kind of how the elections work. But that is the kind of rundown of Policy 500. What we did, clubs funding was part of Policy 500, but because it had really become like the most popular and the most complicated and process heavy service that we offer to clubs, we actually pulled that all of anything to do with clubs funding and we put it into a separate policy. And we just wanted to make it a little bit more clear for the clubs. If they're looking for funding, they can just go directly to this policy. Also, as I mentioned, the club's administrator is primarily going to be handling the administrative side of clubs funding. So we thought it would be much easier for them to have one kind of specific policy to reference. For this one, there were some changes about the Scotiabank account down here. So that's something that we required starting last year. All clubs have to bank through Scotiabank now. It makes it really easy for BUSU to transfer any approved funding directly to the club. We had really great feedback on it. So we put that into the policy last year and we just kind of cleaned that up a little bit. We talk a little bit about funding misuse. And then something new that we've added in was a guide for the clubs policy committee, which we're looking to change to the club's advisory committee, on some recommended funding amounts that the committee follow when approving funds for the clubs. And these dollar amounts are based off of clubs funding on the last couple of years, not set in stone, but it's just made to kind of provide a guide for the committee year after year to hopefully make funding a little bit more fair and equitable. So if, multiple clubs are looking to host a workshop, we want the committee to be sticking around the 500 mark for each one. And then also, again, if that goes into the next year, clubs are going to be expecting to kind of get the same amount of money. And then just the one final part I'll highlight is currently right now, so clubs can request funding once in the fall semester and once in the winter semester. And if either of those requests are under $1,500, the club's manager can currently approve or deny that themselves. And that's worked really well for us. And that helps speed along the process of getting clubs their funding and not kind of delaying the amount of time it takes them to get through CPC. So we've been encouraging clubs to present one request in the fall semester for the entire year. So we don't have that influx of requests coming later in the year when we may be close to running out of funds. So we've adjusted that amount kind of accordingly. So if the club's administrator now comes upon a request for the entire year that is for $3,000 or less, then we're recommending that they be allowed to approve that. And that dollar amount's kind of the threshold we found between the kind of simple events that clubs run that are not very complicated requests that we see quite often, and the ones that get more complicated that are big events and the ones that require more parts to it. So that would be more of an event that requires a venue and transportation and food, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the ones that would stay with the clubs committee. So that's kind of the breakdown of 501. And then I'm just going to bring up the club's code of conduct. So this was, oh, sorry, I'm not sharing. Give me 1 second. Zoom disappeared on me. So the club's code of conduct, this was actually a document that our lawyers have recommended that we put into place. So this was primarily written by our legal representation at Lancaster, Chown and Welsh. And Kate and I have kind of taken this document and, personalized it the way that we need to make it fit clubs, BUSU clubs. Its primary purpose is to define basically what is inappropriate behavior that can happen at clubs and encourage clubs to report any of that behavior, and then lets clubs know that if this behavior does happen, that the policy 500, the steps taken that I kind of just went over very briefly, that's how it's handled. So again, it talks about the scope, it gives some important definitions, and then talks about like our commitment as BUSU and how we will handle it, and then the commitment that club executives and club members have, and also making sure that they're providing, a safe and happy environment for students to gather and have the events and be members of these clubs. So those are the 3 documents in a nutshell. I'm happy to answer any questions. These documents went through Chloe. They went through Anusha. Kate and Robert have seen them as well too. And yeah, so if anybody does have any questions, I'm happy to share.
Does anyone have any questions regarding the policy changes? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Um, so I just wanted to ask because I was trying to do a comparative um, criticism or just comparing the changes, and it is very different from the one before, and I definitely noticed that as well. I was curious under interpretation. There does seem to be more um, members who are part of the interpretation, so I wanted a clarification on are all of these entities students, or is there now greater non-students who would be administering the interpretation?
Yep. So the interpretation is basically left up to the ultimately up to the board. If there's any issues, the policy is going to come back to the board to handle. But on the day to day, the interpretation comes down to what we call the club's team, which is also defined a little bit further down, but that would be the VPSS. Um, as the chair of the club's advisory committee, it would be Chloe, who's our club's manager. That would be whoever is going to be hired as our club's administrator, and then myself as Chloe's supervisor and the staff member who handles kind of the escalated issues that we have with clubs.
Does that answer your question?
Am I able to follow up, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Kaylee. Um, uh, so I do acknowledge I wasn't, I don't have as much information about uh, experience-wise how I was carried out in terms of the uh, club's system like before, but at least from the documentation, I did notice that specifically the older policy 500 under interpretation, it only mentions the vice president of student services and club's manager, but in the new one, it also mentions a director of governance advocacy in clubs. So I just wanted to understand this new role, if it is a new role, and why it would be necessary.
Yeah, that's my role. That's my title. So I was added on there because about a year ago, the oversight of clubs was added to my portfolio. So the clubs part wasn't on there previously. It was years ago when I was the club's manager, but there were some kind of changes that were made and clubs was put under my portfolio. And so um, I don't have day-to-day involvement with clubs, I would say, but I do jump in whenever Chloe's unavailable, and I do handle any kind of club issues that get escalated to the point where kind of a more senior staff member needs to step in.
Thank you.
I have a question. So I know last year club funding ran out in November. And in all of my years of being a student and being involved with BUSU, I've never seen that happen. So I'm just wondering what we're doing to prevent something like this from happening again. And I know that there are certain clubs that do get funding that is like 20 grand to 30 grand. And it's not just one club, there's a couple. So I'm just wondering what we're going to do just so it's a little more even. Like I know there are some clubs that do bigger events that involve a little more funding, but for funding to run out in November last year, and there was nothing that was being given out after that. I'm just wondering what we're going to do to prevent that. So all clubs kind of get an equal shot because there might be some clubs who are not prepared for what they need funding for or might not have all their execs in place for whatever reason it is, but might need to request funding later and then for it to be out again wouldn't be completely fair for that club. So I'm just wondering what we can do to kind of help.
Yep. A couple things. So the encouraging clubs to ask for money up front in the year certainly helps. Chloe is very clear with clubs that funding in second semester isn't guaranteed. Also putting in the recommended funding for the most commonly requested things in policy 501 should hopefully help. And then another one of Chloe's focuses is on club fundraising. So we have a new we have club's president's meeting that happens. We also now have club treasurer meeting, and a focus on that is on fundraising. And Chloe's been working specifically with the two clubs that do request the high amount of money, to kind of work with them throughout the year to make sure that they're fundraising and asking for less money. And we're actually seeing some pretty good progress in one of them, at least. I can't speak to the other one, but I think that we're kind of taking the steps we can do to slow it down in the first semester to make sure we have some left over. I'll say that ultimately, like as the department grows and as the number of clubs grow, like we're probably looking at having another referendum in a few years to ask students if they want to fund a little bit more for clubs in order to kind of increase the club funding that's available. And then at that time, it'll be up to the students to decide if that's a priority for them. But yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Okay. And just to follow up from that, is there any way to like cap like the funding? Because like some amounts are really, really high, and you were saying that there was the option of also working with clubs to help them fundraise within themselves. So is there a cap that we would be limiting clubs at as well?
Yeah, so we had a lot of conversations about whether or not we put a hard cap on, and we kind of figured that if we did put a hard cap on it and say that was, I don't know, $10,000, just throwing it out there, it would potentially only really affect a couple clubs that go over that amount. And so we thought the first step we should do is probably put in these guidelines for the club's policy committee to hopefully make it more even for everyone, and then focus on fundraising and see if that does enough to kind of even it out. And then it's certainly kind of on our radar, though, that we may potentially need to put a hard cap in the future.
Okay, thank you. Charlie, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a question about the BUSU Club's Code of Conduct. I noticed mention of Policy 500, but not the new Policy 501. Is there a reason why it's not included?
And let me just pull it up. Extends those of BUSU ratified pursuant. Yeah, I think that it's basically anything that, how do I explain this? Anything that happens that would be related to the policy, any issue that came up would be dealt with policy 500. So I think we just felt like we didn't need to mention 501. In addition to policy 500, clubs also have to agree to follow like a whole slew of Brock policies as well too. So we didn't really mention all of those either. It was just if anything were to happen and clubs were to report something that happened to them, we would be kind of referring back to the steps in policy 500 and dealt with it that way.
Mongees, go ahead.
Thank you, Brielle. So another thought I had after listening to Brielle, Charlie, Haley, is that again referring back to policy 500. I'm curious how we are guaranteeing that student representation is included, because my perception, maybe others may feel differently or similarly, is that increasingly as we're trying to sort certain policy issues and governance issues, we are neglecting student perspectives. And for example, when Brielle pointed out that funding for most clubs ran out by November, I'm sure that there may be other complaints that students may have and we could benefit if we had maybe a committee or something comprising students who can give that feedback or proactively on the ground picking up these issues early on so we can integrate it into our uh, any part of our administration of funding or anything.
Yeah, we do have it's currently clubs policy committee, so it's made up of 11, up to 11 students, I believe. And they're actively involved. They last year, I think, met twice a week. We were by far the most active committee we had. And they dealt with funding and a whole slew of issues that came in with clubs. They also help our clubs team organize and execute club events. So we certainly do have student representation in that way. And yeah, I mean, I think Chloe also does like continuously get feedback from clubs about how things are going. A good example is when we did switch to the requiring them to have Scotiabank accounts, and I'm sure there's club executives who are also on the board, and the feedback we got from that was really positive, and hopefully any of you involved with clubs also had that same experience. So yeah, I think we do hear back from clubs, our students quite a bit on clubs.
Okay, thank you.
And is there any other questions? Is that a new hand, Louise? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Regarding policy 501, where we're setting out funding guidelines, one potential risk and concern I would have, I'm not sure if it would exacerbate, like as in students collectively would feel unfairly treated, but I do think that it may be possible that the guidelines we're setting, because it is an average, there will be many students who are falling below it or above it in terms of their clubs and their financial needs. So I'm wondering how we will um, engage students and help them understand both maybe our financial limitations, but also our commitment to whatever they have planned in their engagement.
Let's try to answer. I'm not sure I totally understand the question, but the guidelines are just meant to be just that, guidelines. So, you know, if a workshop, for example, it's recommended that the funding stay lower than $500. The club's committee is going to take a look at, you know, how big the workshop is, how many students are going to be attending, if it needs to be off campus, how much the speaker, for example, is going to cost them. So there's a lot of factors that go into it, and no club request is going to be the same. But it is meant to just be a guide so that if a request comes to the club's committee for a workshop and the club wants $2,000, okay, well, let's go look back at the policy. It's recommending we only approve 500. Let's kind of go through this and think about what's an appropriate amount to give. So I think we needed to put something in place. I think we needed to have something in a policy that guides the committee year after year. And I don't think it's fair for us to put like a certain dollar amount on certain things because clubs vary so much. But this is kind of what we thought was kind of the happy medium, where if we had some guidelines, it's just going to help the committee just kind of stay fair to all the clubs.
that does answer my question. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
We're just
Um,
around 30 minutes, Brielle, just to let you know.
Okay, sounds good. Any other questions? Do we have board members that sit on CPC? Like, are we electing people to sit on that? No?
No, it's advisory committee members. If there's any club issues that come forward to CPC that get escalated to the board, that's when the board would become involved.
Okay. All right. Um, Seeing there's no questions, we need a second reading for this, correct, Kaylee?
No, we don't need a second reading.
Okay.
Sorry, I'll share that again.
Okay, so our motion on the table is be it resolved, board approves policy 500 as presented, be it further resolved, board approves policy 501 as presented, and be it further resolved, board approves the club's code of conduct as presented. Can we get a mover for that? Thomas, seconder. Rajat, all in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion is passed. Can we motion to move in camera now? Moved by Thomas, seconded by Charlie, all in favor? Okay, so board will move in camera at 6:38 p.m. So we'll continue with item number 7 on the agenda, business continuity policy. Robert, go ahead.
If I can, I'll turn this over to Kate. Kate is going to present this.
Okay.
Perfect. So I believe you all received this already in your board package, so hopefully you got a chance to review it. But essentially it came up because Kaylee was actually working on getting us a certain kind of accreditation through an organization we belong to for management of student unions across Canada. And so it came up as one of the criteria, and we got talking about it, and we were like, well, you know what, we actually, while we know what we would do in the event of a disaster or emergency, we don't actually have that written down anywhere. So we probably should do that. So we started the exercise of just going through, and we wanted to formalize a policy around how we would handle any sort of business disruption in the event that we needed to. So essentially, it's just there to say how the organization would continue to function in the event of some sort of catastrophe or disaster, something we're not prepared for. And while every different scenario is going to be slightly different, so we can't in this sense write out like a exact set of procedures that, like, you know, no one knew COVID-19 was going to be a thing, so we can't write exact procedures of what we would do, but this policy is saying in general the responsibility is going to lie with senior management, and we are responsible for making sure that we consider things like critical business assets in our areas. For example, for a while, during my tenure at BUSU, there was only one computer that our entire payroll system was reliant on, and that computer was getting older and older. That's not a great system in place. So now we're essentially saying every senior manager of a department needs to be looking at things like that to make sure that there is a backup for critical business functions like payroll, like accounting, like our IT. Have we considered, the things that would protect us from an IT breach, for example? Have we moved as much as we can to the cloud so that it's not reliant on a physical piece of equipment potentially breaking? Have we considered another pandemic? And do all our employees have the tools that they need to go remote in a hurry if they needed to? That's what this policy is doing. It's basically giving some responsibilities to department managers to consider a what if scenario in their area and be responsible for identifying a potential gap, raising it with their manager, usually Robert or myself, and then us to come up with a plan to ensure that there are no gaps as best as we can. And then in the event of one of these situations, who's the ultimate decision maker? In this sense, it's written for the general manager to be the main point of contact. That's largely because they have continuity. The president's going to change every year. Their contact information is going to change every year. It's difficult to update that. It's easier to have one familiar person. That campus security, for example, has Robert's cell phone. In the event that something goes terribly wrong, they will reach out to him, and then he will disperse to the rest of the staff, whom he would also have contact for. So that's the gist of it. Is we just need to outline that, this is something we are aware of. We do need to hold our staff accountable to making sure there aren't gaps in their area. We do need to think ahead, and we need to have a general plan that, if it's IT related, Robert's going to reach out to our IT company. If it's security related, he'll reach out to campus security. If it's finance related, he'll reach out to finance. So, and then the only other thing that this sort of does is that in any event, the things we're going to prioritize is payroll and accounting. Those are the things IT. So we need to make sure that our network is up and running, that we can still pay people, that we can still pay our vendors. We're going to prioritize restoring those things, and then we will work to getting everything else up and running. So that's the gist of it. That's how it came about. Happy to answer any questions anyone might have on it.
Thanks, Kate. Does anybody have any questions about the business continuity policy? Please, yeah.
So, at least when I reviewed the business continuity policy, I know it mentions that these issues, or whenever they do happen, like they would be communicated to students by email or another medium. I'm just wondering, is there any way that students are able to give directly like some sort of feedback or input in the kind of stakeholder process?
On this policy?
So when issues do arise, are they able to give some type of input? Is that accounted for in this policy, or is it not?
Not when issues arise, really, no, because the assumption is this is like a disaster or some sort of emergency where I'm assuming there's no time to consult with students about how we move forward with getting our operations back and going. So I guess the time for their input would be now, bringing it to the board, and that if you see any glaring issues with the way the policy is written, but I don't really see how we wouldn't have time to consult with students in the event of an IT data breach, for example. or even a natural disaster of some sort.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted clarification on like the stakeholder process. That was it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions regarding the business continuity policy? Does everyone think it looks good? Does anyone want to think there should be something added, something taken out, anything like that, or just any questions? If not, then we can just go right to the vote to approve it. It doesn't need a second reading, am I correct? Okay, all right. So seeing no hands up, we'll just go, I'll ask for a mover then. So be it resolved, board approves the BUSU business continuity policy as presented. Thomas and a seconder, Hinkle. Any other discussion on this before we take a vote? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? And any abstentions? All right, that motion passes. Was there anything else up there? Or was that it?
Sorry, just the two reports.
Okay.
Roberts is up first.
There we go.
Madam Chair, do you want to give me a time limit?
You think you can do under 5?
I can do under 5.
Okay.
So my report was duly circulated, so I'm happy to answer questions on any item, but I will highlight a few items. I prepared for this in advance of the meeting. So with respect to new student space, a motion went to the Brock University Board of Trustees. They've encouraged us to continue moving forward, and we will be hiring an architect, and we will be issuing, basically, we will be determining what architect that we're going to use to get to what we consider our final board meeting, Board of Trustees meeting at Brock University, on or about December the 5th. So what we're going to do is we're going to engage an architect. We're going to sort of say, this is what maybe the building may look like inside. Certainly, we're going to engage our board on that because we would never be bringing anything to our Board of Trustees that the board does not see, and then move forward with the Board of Trustees. This is the closest we've ever been to this building, and it's been a long journey. So that's the first update. My second update is around sustainability. And this was in my report last meeting, but I wanted to sort of flag it because we didn't present reports in the last meeting, is that we actually reduced, and Kaylee and Dave are really responsible for this. We reduced our portion of campus waste from 7.75% in 2019 to 2.36% last year. And so that's a really huge accomplishment because we are literally sorting all our waste right now. We also have now replaced all of our lights in our entire building. And the project will reduce our energy by 67%, resulting in $12,450 in savings per year for BUSU. So I wanted to sort of give my sort of hands up to Kaylee and Dave for their work on both of these projects. I think from a sustainability point of view, they move us forward. With respect to spring and summer transit, as of the time I've submitted this report, we have actually sold 1,394 passes, which is a fair number of them through the spring and summer. And then the breakdown of passes is in my report. And I want to thank you to Carly and Joanne for their work on that project. In health and dental, we renewed our agreement with Student VIP, and we now will have a contract in place. Essentially, we manage almost all of the finances of our health and dental plan. We just pay them to receive the claim, decide if it's valid, and pay them out. That's really what we do with them for the most part. And I want to thank again Carly and Kate and Joanne for their work on that project. Kaylee mentioned earlier an online voting system, and it will be implemented in 2024, 2025, and it will save BUSU approximately $6,000 per year. So Kaylee and Jesse, great job on that project. And I'm getting toward the end here in terms of our financial audit. We're through the real heavy lifting of our financial audit. We should complete the audit this week, and we should be able to present to you in September the results of the audit. And in fact, the auditor will present to you because they actually work for you. And my final two sort of comments is that I am working on my master's degree in education. I will submit my final assignment for this term on Saturday. That's what my goal is. I then will be heading to Calgary for my very first vacation in like 2 years, August the 6th through 13th. I'm going to visit my son, Aaron, who's living in Calgary. And then I will have one class remaining in the fall of 2024, and I'll complete my thesis in the winter. So that will complete my master's in education program. And as of today, there are 34 days remaining until the start of Badger Fest. So the time is now ticking. So thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Robert, for your report. I actually do have a question about, I don't remember where it is, but the online voting system, if you go back to that point.
A little scroll down, Kaylee. Sorry.
Sorry, I don't know
Go
where
down.
it is.
Keep going.
Oh, there it is.
There it is,
Yep.
number 12. So this is implemented for this coming year, correct?
Yes.
to
Kaylee, if I may, go ahead.
Yeah, we'll start it this year.
Okay, sorry, I just see a message in the chat from Kate. So thanks, Kate, again for being here tonight. I don't know if she left already. Anyways, I'm just wondering, now that we've $6,000, what are we planning to do with those funds? Does that go right into elections, or where does that go for students?
So the election costs are part of the Division 1 budget. The board is going to see that budget probably at the September meeting. We're just a little delayed because we're going to bring in a VPSS and finish goal setting and set the budget then. So the money will just get reallocated in Division 1 to another line.
So it doesn't particularly have to be for elections. It could be like in sustainability initiatives, or like BUSU Swag for students or something like that, correct?
Yep. It'll go kind of to probably not sustainability initiatives because we have the separate green levy, but yeah, it'll go to another line in Division 1, and doing kind of an initial exercise of putting together the Division 1 budget. We will certainly be happy to have that extra $6,000 to put towards another initiative.
Perfect. And then if I can ask as well, just what happened to Simply Voting?
Yeah, I really like Simply Voting. It's been a really great software for us to use over the past few years. One of the perks of our new website that we launched a couple of years ago was that they have voting software implemented in the website. So we didn't jump on it right away because it was a lot switching over everything to a new website, and we really didn't want to kind of, fully jump on board with a new software when we're sending a ballot out to 17,000 students. We didn't want anything to go wrong. And there was certainly a lot of learning we had to do. It's actually kind of funny because the provider that the website is from, located in the UK, and they have very different terminology than we do. And so setting up the election, we're like, what does all of this mean? We have no idea. There's different terms for different things. So we had to get that worked out with them. It took a little while. Then we started using it for the clubs as kind of a soft launch to see if the clubs could figure it out, and it worked really well. Then we had the board do it for the test that we did for ranked ballots, and it worked well. So we're kind of ready to pull the trigger on it and use it this year. We've been told by MSL, which is the new website company, that organizations have typically seen a jump in voter turnout and switching to their software. So we are hoping that we have the same result as some of their other clients. It is quite easy for us to use, and we can send out the ballot kind of the same way that Simply Voting does. And there's a lot of cool kind of interactive features that we're looking forward to taking advantage of.
Cool. Now with switching over to the new software, can you see voters or is it still anonymous?
It's still anonymous, but we can get a live count of how many people have voted. And there's different widgets that we can add to our website, to the different TV screens around our building if we want to kind of show a live, we've had, 1,000 students vote, let's keep going, or we could set a goal. So there's some nicer features there. Another good part of it is that we get more data out of our website. So now that we have the full student list on our website and students are voting, there's a lot of different reports we can run. So we can see, we don't see who has voted for what, but we can see who's voting and we can see if they're first years or if they're second years. And we tried to kind of pull that data in the past with Simply Voting using the election or using the student emails, like the year in the student emails. So it's not a perfect method. But we'll be able to do a lot more now that we have access to more data.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Does anyone else have any questions for Robert in his report? Everything seemed good. Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much, Robert. And Anisha, when you're ready.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Kelly. All right. So I'll be as quick as possible. I know everybody's kind of wanting to get out with the meeting, so I'll be as quick as possible. So just in terms of current activities, we're doing Smart Start right now. Now Carly and me are kind of switching off on days of Smart Start, so that's going well. We're interacting with a lot more students and promoting Badger Fest as much as possible. I am scheduling check-in meetings with a lot of my execs. Now it's only one for the time being until Mark and we hire a new VPSS. So just working on those. I just met with alumni relations last week to get some insight on how their departments are and how we cross over because I am in the process of setting up some meetings with senior administration at Brock to kind of get an idea of how everything's working because the summer is the good time to kind of connect with everybody to get a set of how things are going. Like Robert said, I did attend the Cycle 5 board meeting along with Carly Charlton, the Vice President of University Affairs, wherein we did get, the board did allow us to move ahead with the new student center, and we are currently in the process of hiring an architect, which is a big win for us. Did attend the board annual dinner, which was the last bit for the last fiscal year. And then we also currently, as I said, we're meeting with architects to hire someone soon. In terms of committees and hiring, I was currently on a committee for health and clinical operations with Student Accessibility Center, as well as the Sports Medicine Clinic. They were looking to hire a managerial position. So I'm glad I just got wrapped up with that last week. It was a great opportunity since I have a keen interest in going into human resources later on. So I was really excited to be on it. I got to learn a lot and some really good candidates. Second things, this is kind of just jumping off with the VPSS role. I'm working with Chloe and Celine right now to kind of put some planning and next steps for the VPSS role as we get someone new. And also just handling some of the committees that the VPSS was on. I'm still slowly just transitioning onto those committees and also working on an action plan for the incoming VPSS. And again, still on the hiring committee for the VPSS, so we're hoping to get someone as soon as possible, hopefully next week. The next thing is the VPEA plan. So I have been in touch with Mark as much as possible. But I am working with Carly on a plan as Carly is more involved with USA just on Mark's behalf as of now. So me and Carly are working on a streamlining plan just to see how we can get things up to speed once he's back in August and get him on track. We are going to be starting with the LEAP program, which is part of Brock's orientation program. It's a great way for us to connect with students. Incoming students have a really good enthusiasm when they come in, and they really like it when they meet with the student union. So we are going to be starting that starting tomorrow, and then another 4 or 5 days in August. With the GA planning, the GA is happening in at Brock this year, so we are working towards that planning. The VPSS and the VPUA, we're planning that along with BUSA, but currently me and Carly, which is the VPUA, we are working on it until the new VPSS arrives, just so that we can have things in place for them when they arrive. Next things is basically I met with alumni relations as well again. So this was Brock University alumni relations, which is slightly different than just alumni relations here at Brock. I met with Chris, who was able to give me a great rundown of how things go and how they are different. And we really wanted to connect on a lot of things in terms of future projects and how we can kind of interconnect later on. We did show you the club's policies today. I worked with Kaylee, Robert, Kate on finalizing those policies, so I'm glad that they were all approved today. Coming to the VPUA, bus passes for the 2024-2025 academic year are all on track. We have received 13,000 stickers for the new year, and everything's going great. I know Carly is working on kind of a form that would help us kind of narrow down the student queries on UPass if they kind of have questions about opt-in, opt-out, all those kind of things. That reduces our email load a little bit. So they are working on a form that could just go onto our website. So she's working with Jessie on that, our marketing manager. And then additionally, we will be reaching out to you folks soon. I know Kaylee already sent out the email last week about volunteering for Badger Fest, so we might have some of you folks on the UPass table as well. Health and dental insurance, this is something that Robert has already covered, so I'm going to skip that part. Currently, we are also working on the Niagara Region Transit contract as it is up for some renegotiations, so Carly's working on that as well. As I said, GA planning, I've already covered that as part of my previous report. And then there was an update that we got over the weekend, I believe. Robert can correct me if I'm wrong. It's about the Open Education Resources update. As of July 25th, there has been a 12.04x return on investment when referring to how much money has been put in versus student savings. That is really, it's good to know. And then the new student center project, again, we are currently working on it, as I mentioned earlier. With the VPEA role, I have been talking to Mark. Mark has given me a couple of updates on how he has been able to work out a few readings. He has read the transition document that the previous VPEA, Alyssa Hall, had provided him, as well as he's going to be writing a paper for the spring GA. So he's kind of figuring out what part of the paper he wants to write so that he can get started on it as soon as he's back. And then also he's read a few policy papers pertaining to that paper that he's going to be writing. That date that I just put there, as per my last meeting, he'll be joining us August 22nd. That is slightly wrong because I just spoke to him today. And we should be having him soon on August 19th since he's traveling back from Ghana on August 16th. So that is also exciting news for me and for our entire team. Last thing for VPSS, I don't have anything much right now. We're just hiring is in progress, and hopefully we have someone soon. I'm happy to take any questions. I believe that was the end of my report.
Thank you so much, Anisha, for your report. Are there any questions for the president? All right, seeing as there's none, I believe that was our last agenda meeting item. Yes, perfect. Okay. Can I get a motion to adjourn our meeting? Thomas, perfect. Adjourned at 8:31 p.m. I hope everyone has a great night, and thank you so much for being here.